What if your entire life, your fate, your health, even your mind was shaped before you were born, all because your ancestors were obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure for centuries? Royal families across the globe made a chilling trade genetic risk for political power. The result: shattered minds, broken bodies, and family trees twisted beyond recognition. Today we're uncovering the heartbreaking, unbelievable, and sometimes truly unsettling stories of history's most inbred women, and believe me, by the time we reach number 1 you'll be stunned. Starting off at number 10 is Isabella II of Spain, who ruled from 1833 to 1868, a monarch whose life was marked not by grandeur but by the grim cost of generations of intermarriage. Born in 1830, Isabella's arrival as a daughter was strangely welcomed after her father's long and desperate hope for a male heir, but the joy didn't last long. From the very beginning, Isabella's health and that of her sister raised quiet concerns, and it's no surprise her birth was the result of a union between an uncle and his niece. It gets more tangled. Her grandparents on one side were also her great-grandparents on the other, a true labyrinth of lineage. At just 16, Isabella was married off to her double second cousin. She bore 11 children, yet only 5 lived past infancy, and here's where things get even more complicated. Many historians believe her husband fathered none of those surviving children. Their marriage was likely strained, influenced by personal and possibly unspoken truths about her husband's identity. In the end, Isabella lost her crown, but her legacy remains one steeped in the shadows of her family's genetic entrapments. At number 9 we find Marie Louise of Austria. Born into one of Europe's most deeply entangled dynasties, her parents were double first cousins, meaning they shared both sets of grandparents in a family where cousin marriages were the rule, not the exception. Tragedy came often. Of 12 children, only 7 lived into adulthood. The intensity of inbreeding in her lineage is staggering. Marie Louise, genetically speaking, had only 4 unique great-grandparents, half the normal number. That's the kind of genetic compression scientists today only see in highly isolated populations. At 18, Marie Louise was handed over in marriage to none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, her father's former enemy. It was a political strategy, an attempt at peace, and a calculated move to secure a male heir. For Marie Louise, it was also the weight of an empire placed squarely on her young shoulders. At number 8 we jump from royal palaces to the stark realities of a small American town. Lorraine Whitaker's story proves that the legacy of extreme inbreeding isn't ancient history, it's still echoing in modern times. Featured in a well-known documentary, the Whitaker family became a case study in what happens when generations of isolation and intermarriage are left unchecked. Lorraine stands out as a chilling figure. Documented as one of the most inbred individuals in recent memory, she is also the mother of Timmy Whitaker, often regarded as possibly the most genetically affected person alive today. Their story is unsettling, not for shock value but for the reminder this isn't just royal history, it's a human one, repeating itself in hidden corners of the world. Coming in at number 7, Maria the Fine of Portugal, known by some as Maria the Pious, though others might argue Maria the Troubled is more fitting. Born in 1734, Maria's life was one of mounting mental strain and a bloodline packed with royal unions far too close for comfort. Her parents, King Joseph the Van of Portugal and Maria Anna of Spain, were the 16th Iberian royal couple, joined by close intermarriage, and that wasn't the end of it. Maria herself, under pressure to maintain the family name, made a decision that sealed her legacy. She married her own uncle. The results were as tragic as they were predictable. Half of her children didn't survive, with genetic complications likely playing a major role, and as she aged, Maria's mental state deteriorated until she was deemed unfit to rule. Her story is one of royalty undone not by war or rebellion, but by the invisible toll of genetic repetition. Number 6 brings us to the heartbreaking saga of Mare Louise, Elizabeth Dorian, a woman whose entire life reads like a Gothic novel written in blood and sorrow. Born into a deeply dysfunctional royal arrangement, her father was forced to marry his own cousin, an illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV. As the eldest surviving child of that union, Marie Louise had no real choice in her future. She was married off again to another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. The results: 3 children, none of whom survived childhood. Whether it was the overwhelming weight of inbreeding or another curse of circumstance, history can't say for sure. What we do know is that Marie Louise turned to alcohol at an astonishingly young age. Reports say as early as 14. Was it a cry for help or a way to cope with the heavy hand dealt? To her either way her legacy is a tragic tale of dynastic duty gone horribly wrong. At number 5 we turn to a lesser known but deeply fascinating royal figure, Princess Alexia of Greece. Born in 1965. Her story bridges the fading tradition of royal unions and the lasting echoes of aristocratic inbreeding. She and her four siblings came from one of the last significant royal marriages between a sitting king and a royal princess, but there was more to this union than romantic headlines. Her parents, Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, weren't just royal, they were closely related not once but twice. They were second cousins and third cousins, creating a double bond that was as political as it was personal, and their family trees knotted and heavy. Constantine's great-grandparents were siblings. One of his grandmothers was also the sister of his great-grandfather. Anne-Marie's ancestry carried its own tangled legacy, though their marriage appeared loving. Their close genetic ties ensured that their children, including Alexia, were partially inbred, much like the famously related British royals, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. A modern royal tale rooted in a very old tradition. Taking the 4th spot is someone whose name rarely gets mentioned, despite her staggering genetic legacy. Maria Antonia of Austria, a Habsburg who surpassed even her infamous uncle, Charles II of Spain, in terms of inbreeding. While Charles is often cited as the ultimate example of the Habsburgs' genetic downfall, Maria Antonia's family tree makes his look simple. Her ancestry wasn't a tree at all, it was more like a dense looping vine, a tangle of repeated names and repeated marriages. Some have gone as far as calling it a genetic circle rather than a lineage. The extent of her inbreeding was so severe that her genetic similarity matched that of a child born to 2 full siblings, yet her story is often overshadowed. History may have forgotten her name, but from a genetic standpoint she stood at the very peak of Habsburg inbreeding, a quiet yet unforgettable figure in this long and complex narrative. Stepping far back in time, number 3 introduces us to 2 mysterious figures not remembered by name but by number, mummies 317A and 317B. Though they never ruled, their tiny preserved bodies carry a tale of ancient sorrow and genetic consequence. These 2 infant girls were the daughters, likely still born, of none other than Pharaoh Tutankhamun and his wife Anesorn, born around 1300 BCE. But here's the haunting detail: Ankhesemen was not just Tutankhamun's queen, she was also his half-sister. They shared the same father, continuing a dynasty-long tradition of sibling marriage within Egypt's royal family. Tutan himself was the product of years of tightly confined bloodlines. By the time his daughters were conceived, the genetic risks had reached a devastating peak. Their short lives, marked by deformities and frailty, are chilling reminders of how even divine kings could not escape the cruel arithmetic of inbreeding. At number 2, we move from pharaohs and palaces to a modern, deeply disturbing case, Kimberley cult. This isn't a royal tale, but it carries some of the darkest consequences of unchecked inbreeding in recent history. Kimberley's story comes from Australia, where her family, known publicly under a pseudonym, became the center of one of the most shocking genetic and legal revelations of the early 2000s. Living in deep isolation, the cult family practiced multi-generational inbreeding, creating a closed-loop community with almost no outside genetic input. When the truth came to light, authorities intervened, uncovering a disturbing and complex web that led to multiple police investigations and arrests. Kimberley, born into this environment, is one of the most genetically compromised individuals ever documented. Her case isn't about royal pressure or dynastic pride, it's a modern example of how isolation and lack of oversight can produce unimaginable human cost. And now, at the top of the list, Cleopatra II. Philopator, the woman who more than anyone else embodied the full force of calculated inbreeding for political power. Forget the romanticized version of Cleopatra often shown in films. This Cleopatra was not a fantasy figure but the very embodiment of dynastic obsession. Though Egyptian by rule, her bloodline was purely Greek-Macedonian, born from the Ptolemaic dynasty, which relentlessly practiced brother and uncle niece marriages to keep power concentrated and pure. Cleopatra II's parents were siblings. Her grandparents were also siblings, and her own siblings married each other before she eventually ruled alone. She was a living monument to the strategy of bloodline preservation. Powerful but heavily burdened, even her name borrowed from a rare Syrian princess was one of the few hints that any outsider had ever been allowed into the family tree. Cleopatra II wasn't just a royal figure, she was the genetic culmination of generations of tightly woven lineage, a powerful ruler whose biology bore the heavy weight of a family's calculated ambition, from majestic courts to forgotten villages, from glittering crowns to remote isolation. The pursuit of purity, power, and legacy has twisted the stories of these women into tales of tragedy, resilience, and revelation. Their lives remind us how history is often shaped not just by politics or war, but by the invisible hands of biology and blood.